I thought we adopted a child, until I found him sniffing my underwear. My heart stopped dead the moment I opened my bedroom door. There he was, Tim, our adopted 6-year-old. His little face was buried deep in my underwear drawer. He was sniffing my delicate lace underwear, holding a pair to his nose like it was a special flower. My stomach just dropped. But what really froze me was the creepy smirk he gave me when he saw me standing there. It vanished super fast, replaced by wide, innocent eyes. He stumbled back, dropping the underwear, and then just vanished from the room like a ghost. His words were too perfect, his calm too steady for a kid his age. It was like watching a tiny grown-up pretending to be a child. Mark and I had been through so much trying to have a baby. Years of trying, doctors, hoping, and then just crushing sadness. Adopting Tim was supposed to be our miracle, our second chance at having a family. Mark, bless his heart, just wanted to believe in that dream so badly. He brushed off my worries, saying Tim had a tough past and we needed to be extra patient. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, truly wrong. The weird things kept happening, small at first, then impossible to ignore. Tim would squirm and pull away like a scared animal whenever a doctor tried to check him. His eyes would dart around the room, checking things out, figuring stuff. He never wanted to play with other kids his age at the park. Instead, he'd sit perfectly still on a bench, watching them like they were bugs in a box. And then he'd just know things he shouldn't, like how much our house payment was, or if Mark's big bonus had come in yet, stuff we never talked about when he was around. It got to the point where I started feeling like I was the crazy one, wondering if I was losing my mind. Desperate for answers, I secretly put a few small cameras around the house. My hands shook as I set them up, feeling like a spy in my own home. What they caught made my blood run cold. One night, I watched him, clear as day, signing my name on what looked like a loan paper. His movements were smooth, like he'd practiced, not a kid's messy writing. Another time, he was whispering into a burner phone, his voice low and scary, talking about the plan and how they wouldn't suspect a thing. He sounded like a tough criminal, not a 6-year-old. I reached out to Dr. Elena, an old friend who's a child psychologist. She listened patiently without judging, then suggested we watch him more closely. We set up a family game night, with puzzles and tasks made for a 6-year-old. Tim, without even blinking, solved a Rubik's Cube super fast and put together a complicated jigsaw puzzle meant for teenagers, like a grown-up would. During a science experiment game, I managed to get some of his spit, saying it was for a school project. I sent it off to a private lab, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the envelope. The results came back yesterday. Tim isn't 6. He's 21. His name is Victor, and he has a rare condition that makes him look like a child. My son is a grown man living in our house, actively planning against us. And now I have to pretend I don't know, because if I confront him without more proof, it could put us in even bigger danger. I couldn't fit whole story here. Watch the full video down below. The blood in my veins felt like ice. Tim, or rather Victor, wasn't 6. He was 21. My son was a grown man, a calculated imposter, living under our roof, meticulously planning against us. The lab results, stark and undeniable, screamed the truth I had desperately tried to push away. And now, I had to pretend I didn't know. The thought of confronting him, without more proof, without understanding the full scope of his twisted agenda, sent shivers down my spine. It could put Mark and me in even greater danger. The innocent facade he maintained, the wide, childish eyes, now felt like a cruel mockery, a performance perfected over years. I locked myself in my study, the world outside the door blurring into an irrelevant hum. My mind raced, replaying every unsettling incident, every quirk that I had dismissed or rationalized away. The way he knew about our mortgage, Mark's bonus, the detached observation of other children, the uncanny intelligence in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. It all clicked into place with horrifying precision. He wasn't a troubled child. He was a master manipulator. My first thought was to call the police, but what would I tell them? My 6-year-old son is actually a 21-year-old man with a rare condition, and I have spit DNA to prove it. They'd think I was delusional. I needed more. Concrete evidence. A motive. Something that would stand up in a court of law. I remember Dr. Elena's calm, unwavering support. She was a child psychologist, yes, but more importantly, she was a friend. She had seen through my frantic ramblings and encouraged me to trust my instincts. She was the only person I could confide in, the only one who wouldn't immediately dismiss me as crazy. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. "Elena," I whispered, my voice barely a thread. "It's worse than I thought. Much, much worse." She listened, as always, patiently and without interruption, as I recounted the lab results. There was a pause on the other end when I finished, a long, heavy silence that spoke volumes. "Sarah," she finally said, her voice soft but firm, "this is a serious situation. You need to be incredibly careful. Do you have anything else? Anything that could link him to his real identity or to any other activities?" Her question spurred me into action. I remembered the nanny cam footage, the signing of the loan papers, the hushed phone calls on the burner phone. It was all there, recorded, time-stamped. But what did it all mean? Who was they? And what was the plan? "I have footage," I told her, "of him signing what looks like loan documents and talking on a burner phone, mentioning the plan and they." "Good," she said. "Keep gathering what you can, but do it subtly. And Sarah, do not, under any circumstances, let him know you're onto him. He's clearly intelligent and resourceful. He could be dangerous." Dangerous. The word hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the creepy smirk, the calculated innocence. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I was living with a predator, disguised as a child. I spent the rest of the night poring over the nanny cam footage again, this time with a new, terrifying lens. Every seemingly innocent moment now seemed sinister. His playtime alone in his room, meticulously arranging his toys, felt less like a child's game and more like a strategist planning a chess match. The way he would observe Mark and me, his eyes following our movements, studying our habits. It was all there, a tapestry of deception woven right under our noses. I focused on the loan papers. What kind of loan? Why was he signing my name? Was he trying to steal our identity? Our house? The possibilities spun in my head, each more terrifying than the last. I zoomed in on the document, trying to decipher the fine print, but the resolution wasn't good enough. Then I had an idea. I pulled up my own banking app, checking our accounts, our credit score. Everything seemed normal, no suspicious activity. This didn't make sense. If he was signing loan papers, shouldn't something be showing up? Unless it was for something future. Something he was preparing. The next morning, I approached Victor with a feigned casualness that felt utterly false. He was in the kitchen, eating cereal, looking every bit the innocent 6-year-old. My stomach churned. "Hey, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "I was thinking, it's been a while since we had a proper checkup for you. I'm going to call Dr. Peterson's office and schedule something for next week. Just a routine checkup, make sure you're growing big and strong." I watched his reaction like a hawk. For a split second, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. A shadow of annoyance, perhaps, or a flash of calculation. It was gone almost immediately, replaced by his usual wide, innocent eyes. "Okay, Mommy," he chirped, his voice perfectly sweet. "That sounds fun." A tiny alarm bell went off in my head. Fun. Most kids dreaded doctor's appointments. His immediate, almost too enthusiastic agreement felt off. But I kept my poker face on. This was just a test, a planted seed. I needed to see if he would try to avoid it. Later that day, I deliberately left a printout of a fake doctor's appointment confirmation on the kitchen counter, dated for the following Tuesday. I had even forged a signature. It was a flimsy excuse, but I hoped it would be enough to trigger a reaction. I also made a show of calling Dr. Peterson's office, pretending to schedule the appointment while Victor was within earshot. Over the next few days, Victor's behavior became subtly different. He was more withdrawn, less eager to engage in our usual family activities. He spent more time in his room, and I would occasionally catch snippets of low whispers coming from under his door. He was using the burner phone again. On Monday evening, the day before the supposed appointment, I casually mentioned it again. "Remember, Tim, we have your doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. We'll have to leave a little early." He froze, his spoon clattering against his cereal bowl. "Oh," he said, his voice unusually flat. "Do we have to go?" "I don't feel very good." He started coughing, a dry, unconvincing cough. My heart pounded. This was it. He was trying to get out of it. It was a classic sick child act, but coming from him, it felt menacing. "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry to hear that," I said, feigning concern. "Maybe we can reschedule for another day? But, it's really important to get checked out just in case." He brightened immediately. "Yes, another day. I'll feel much better then." I forced a smile, but inside, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. My little experiment had confirmed my worst fears. He was actively trying to avoid anything that would expose his true identity. He was playing me, and he was good at it. That night, I called Dr. Elena again. "He tried to get out of the appointment," I told her, my voice strained. "He faked being sick." "As expected," she said calmly. "It confirms his deception. What's your next step?" "I need to figure out who he really is, beyond just his age and name," I said, "and why he's here." "I can help you with that," she offered. "Give me his real name, Victor, and I can run it through some databases, see if anything comes up. I have a few contacts in the private investigation world." I gave her the name Victor. It felt surreal to speak it aloud, to acknowledge this imposter's real identity. As I waited for Elena to get back to me, the days dragged on, each one filled with an unbearable tension. I was living a lie, a terrifying charade, in my own home. A few days later, Elena called with the first piece of the puzzle. "Victor's DNA didn't show up in any criminal databases, so that's something," she said, a hint of relief in her voice. "But I did find something else. He's connected to a defunct adoption agency called Hopeful Beginnings. It was shut down about 15 years ago due to irregularities and allegations of fraudulent adoptions." Hopeful Beginnings. The name echoed in my mind, a chilling irony. Could this be how he infiltrated our lives? Through a corrupt system designed to unite families? It felt like another piece of the dark puzzle was falling into place. "Thank you, Elena," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is a start." Why Victor infiltrated the family. The truth, when it slowly began to unravel, was far more convoluted and tragic than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about a con man trying to steal our money or our lives. It was about a deeply personal vendetta, a story rooted in betrayal and abandonment that stretched back decades. Elena, through her contacts, managed to dig deeper into Victor's past, painstakingly piecing together fragments of his life. His biological father, a man named Richard, had had an affair with Victor's mother, Laura, 22 years ago. My blood ran cold at the name Richard, my father's name. It couldn't be. But it was. Laura had given birth to Victor, who, even as an infant, was diagnosed with the rare growth condition that made him appear perpetually childlike. Richard, upon learning of Victor's condition and unwilling to face the consequences of his affair, had abandoned Laura and his newborn son, leaving them destitute and heartbroken. Laura, struggling with poverty and the burden of raising a child with a complex medical condition alone, had died when Victor was a teenager. This abandonment, this profound act of betrayal, had fueled Victor's rage. He had grown up consumed by resentment, a silent, festering wound that had shaped his entire life. He had spent years tracking Richard, watching him from the shadows, meticulously cataloging his new life, his new family, my family. And then, he learned of Richard's perfect second child, me. He learned of our struggles to conceive, of our crushing sadness, of our eventual decision to adopt. And through a corrupt social worker connected to that now-defunct adoption agency, Hopeful Beginnings, Victor saw his opportunity. He posed as a 6-year-old, a child in desperate need of a home, a tragic orphan perfectly suited to tug at the heartstrings of a couple yearning for a family. He infiltrated our home, not just to steal, but to get close to Richard, who frequently visited us, his daughter and son-in-law. His ultimate goal, revenge. To kill Richard for abandoning his mother, for leaving them to suffer while he built a new, seemingly idyllic life. The underwear incident, that horrifying moment that had first cracked my world, wasn't just a random act of a disturbed child. It was a deliberate, calculated move. He had seen my distress, my unease, and he had sought to amplify it. To unnerve me, to destabilize the family, to create an atmosphere of chaos and suspicion, hoping it would create an opportunity to isolate Richard. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father, the man I loved and respected, had a secret life, a secret son, a history of abandonment and betrayal that had now come back to haunt him, and through him, us. The man I had embraced as my son was a vengeful stranger, a ticking time bomb in our living room. Escalation and confrontation. The air in the house grew thick with unspoken tension. Every interaction with Victor felt like walking on eggshells, a dangerous dance where one wrong move could shatter everything. I continued to monitor the nanny cam footage, now with a sickening understanding of his true motives. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest recordings, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Victor was on his burner phone again, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "Tonight," he muttered. "It's time to finish it. They won't suspect a thing." My hands flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. Tonight. Finish what? The realization dawned on me, a horrifying certainty. He knew I was on to him. He had seen me checking the cameras, or perhaps he had just sensed the shift in my demeanor, the fear I could no longer fully conceal. He was accelerating his plan. Just as the thought solidified, I heard a creak behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Victor stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowed, no longer innocent but sharp and calculating. The mask was off. "Mommy," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual childish lilt. "What are you doing?" I fumbled for an excuse, my mind racing. "Just checking on the cameras, sweetie, making sure everything's okay." He didn't respond, just stared at me, his gaze unnervingly piercing. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that he saw through my lie. The game had changed. The next morning, Mark, oblivious to the storm brewing around us, announced his plans. "Honey, my work trip's been moved up. I have to leave this afternoon. My dad, Richard, is actually coming over tonight to drop off some paperwork for the weekend. I told him you'd be here." My blood ran cold. This was it, Victor's opportunity. Mark, away on a work trip. Richard, coming directly into the lion's den. Tonight was the night. I tried to dissuade Mark to come up with an excuse for Richard not to come, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't explain without exposing everything, without risking Mark's safety. I had to play along, to buy myself time. After Mark left, the silence in the house was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic pounding of my heart. I locked myself in my study, desperately trying to formulate a plan. I needed to warn Richard, to get him out of here, but how? Victor would be watching my every move. Suddenly, I heard a faint knocking at the front door. My breath hitched. It was too early for Richard. Who could it be? I crept to the living room window, peering through the blinds. Standing on our porch were two hulking figures, men I had never seen before. They exchanged a brief, conspiratorial look before Victor opened the door, a chillingly adult smile on his face. "Welcome," he said, his voice devoid of any childish pretense. "Come in. We have a lot to discuss." My stomach dropped. His team. The accomplices he'd spoken of on the burner phone. Ex-cons, Elena had said. They were here, in my house. I tried to retreat, to find a hiding place, but it was too late. As I turned, one of the men was already in the living room, blocking my escape. Victor appeared behind me, his eyes gleaming with a malicious triumph. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice deep and resonant, nothing like the childish treble I had grown accustomed to. Or should I say, sister? A wave of nausea washed over me. Sister? What was he talking about? Before I could process the new information, the two men were on me. They were swift, professional, and terrifyingly efficient. I struggled, screamed, but my efforts were futile. Within seconds, my wrists were bound tightly behind my back with zip ties, my ankles similarly restrained. A gag was shoved into my mouth, silencing my cries. I was shoved into a chair in the living room, helpless and terrified. Victor stood before me, his face a mask of cold satisfaction. He removed the gag, but kept his hand over my mouth, preventing me from screaming. "You really thought you could outsmart me, didn't you?" He sneered, his eyes alight with a disturbing intensity. The concerned mother. Sarah. Always so worried, always so vigilant. But you couldn't see what was right in front of your face, could you? He slowly paced around me, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "My name is Victor," he stated, his voice ringing with a chilling authority. "And you, Sarah, are the product of a man who ruined my mother's life. Richard, your father, he abandoned us, left us to rot while he built this perfect little world with his new family, his perfect second daughter." He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Tonight, he pays for what he did, and you, Sarah, get to watch." He explained his twisted plan. How he would lure Richard into the house, stage his death as a burglary gone wrong, a tragic accident, a victim of a random home invasion. No one would ever suspect the 6-year-old adopted son. Panic surged through me, threatening to overwhelm me, but then a small spark of hope flickered. Mark's gift. The smartwatch he had given me for my birthday, the one with the emergency contact feature. It was hidden under my sleeve, the face turned inward. He hadn't noticed it during the struggle. My mind raced. Could I reach it? Could I activate it without them seeing? As Victor continued to rant, detailing his long-held grievances against Richard, I subtly shifted my wrist, inch by agonizing inch, trying to position my thumb over the small emergency button on the side of the watch. His words were a torrent of pain, of a life spent in the shadows, fueled by resentment. He spoke of Laura's struggles, her despair, his years of meticulously planning this moment. He was lost in his own narrative, giving me the precious seconds I needed. My thumb brushed against the button. A silent prayer formed on my lips. "Please, Elena. Please see it. The smartwatch vibrated almost imperceptibly, confirming the sent message. I had set Dr. Elena as my emergency contact, knowing she would understand. The message was a pre-programmed distress signal, my location, and a plea for help. Now, all I could do was stall. Your mother, I whispered, my voice hoarse, playing on his emotions. Tell me about your mother. What was she like? Victor paused, his eyes glazing over with a faraway look. The mention of Laura seemed to pierce through his hardened exterior, revealing a flicker of raw pain beneath the anger. He began to speak, his voice softening slightly, recounting tales of his mother's beauty, her kindness, her struggle, and ultimately, her tragic death. He spoke of his childhood, of being ostracized for his condition, of the crushing weight of poverty and loneliness. He spoke of his unwavering determination to avenge her. His accomplices, growing impatient, shifted uneasily. Victor, we don't have all night, one of them grumbled. Richard will be here soon. Victor, momentarily lost in his memories, snapped back to attention. Right, he said, his voice hardening once more. Let's get ready. They began to ransack the living room, making it look like a robbery. They overturned furniture, threw pillows, scattered papers. I watched in horror, my heart pounding against my ribs, praying the police would arrive in time. Resolution. The shrill wail of police sirens pierced the night, growing louder with each passing second. Victor and his accomplices froze, their eyes wide with disbelief and panic. The carefully constructed facade of a burglary gone wrong shattered instantly. The police! One of the accomplices hissed, his face pale. Victor's carefully cultivated composure finally broke. His eyes darted around the room, a flicker of raw fear in their depths. How? He snarled, his gaze locking on me. How did they know? I met his gaze, a defiant flicker in my own eyes. I had bought enough time. Get out of here, Victor yelled at his accomplices. Now! The two men, clearly not as invested in Victor's personal vendetta, didn't hesitate. They sprinted out the front door just as police officers burst through, weapons drawn. Police! Don't move! Victor, cornered and alone, instinctively reverted to his child persona. He shrank back, his hands trembling, his eyes wide and innocent, the perfect picture of a terrified 6-year-old caught in a frightening situation. Mommy! He cried, his voice trembling, feigning fear. Who are these men? An officer, seeing a small child in distress, immediately lowered his weapon slightly. It's okay, son, he said, approaching cautiously. Are you hurt? Before Victor could continue his charade, an officer moved swiftly to my side, cutting the zip ties binding my wrists and ankles. The gag was removed, and I gasped, drawing in a shaky breath. He's not a child, I cried, my voice hoarse but firm. He's 21 years old. His name is Victor. The officer looked at me, then back at Victor, confusion clouding his face. Victor, seeing his elaborate deception crumbling before his eyes, tried to scramble away, but another officer quickly apprehended him. I have proof, I exclaimed, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. DNA results, nanny cam footage, he's an imposter and he was planning to kill my father. Just then, the front door opened again, and Richard stepped inside, a confused frown on his face. What's going on here? He asked, surveying the chaotic scene. Victor, seeing Richard, let out a guttural scream of rage. You ruined everything! You abandoned us! He lunged forward, but the officers held him back. He's Victor, I said, my voice trembling as I looked at my father, the man who had unknowingly caused so much pain. Your son, Laura's son. Richard's face drained of all color. He stumbled back, his eyes fixed on Victor, then on me, a mixture of shock, horror, and profound sadness etched on his features. Laura? He whispered, his voice barely audible. My son? The officers, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, began to secure the scene. They led Victor away, his struggles and shouts gradually fading as he was taken outside. Richard, looking utterly broken, sank into a nearby chair, burying his face in his hands. Sarah, he choked out, I can explain. He confessed everything. The affair with Laura, her unexpected pregnancy, his panicked abandonment of them both. He spoke of his guilt, a burden he had carried in secret for over 2 decades. He begged for my forgiveness, his voice thick with tears. I listened, numb with a mix of shock and betrayal. My father, the man I had always admired, had a hidden past, a secret son, a history of profound cruelty. The family I thought I knew was fractured, built on a foundation of lies. I stood in the hushed courtroom, the weight of the past few months pressing down on me. Victor, stripped of his childish facade, stood before the judge, a pale and defiant young man. His rare condition was undeniable, but his manipulative actions, his calculated deception, and his violent intentions were laid bare by the overwhelming evidence. The DNA results, the nanny cam footage, my testimony, and even the accounts of his fleeing accomplices, who had been apprehended shortly after, painted a damning picture. The judge, after hearing the evidence, sentenced Victor to a lengthy prison term for kidnapping, fraud, and attempted murder. There was no joy in the verdict for me, only a profound sense of exhaustion and a lingering ache in my heart. Mark stood by my side throughout the ordeal, a steady anchor in the storm. He was devastated by the betrayal, by the shattering of our dreams of a family, but his love for me remained unwavering. We officially dissolved the adoption, a painful but necessary step. The idea of Tim was now irrevocably tainted by the sinister reality of Victor. The aftermath was a blur of police statements, legal meetings, and endless conversations with Dr. Elena. I started therapy with her, trying to process the layers of deception, the betrayal, and the complex emotions surrounding my father's secret life. The man I knew was not who I thought he was, and that realization was a bitter pill to swallow. Mark, in turn, vowed to rebuild our trust, to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon our relationship. Our dream of a family, once so vibrant and hopeful, now felt irrevocably tainted, a fragile thing teetering on the brink. We loved each other deeply, but the foundation had been shaken to its core. Richard, consumed by guilt, tried repeatedly to seek my forgiveness. I saw him, of course, but the conversations were strained, heavy with unspoken accusations and unresolved pain. He was a broken man, haunted by his past, and I, his daughter, was now forced to confront the dark legacy of his choices. Life slowly began to settle into a new, uncertain rhythm. The house felt empty without the constant, terrifying presence of Victor, but also, strangely, quieter, safer. I found myself still checking the nanny cam sometimes, a lingering habit of fear, but the footage was always blessedly mundane.